Here we're going to tie the Poxyback Microstone. First thing we went ahead and did was just added a bead to the fly, and we're just going to let it slide to the back of the hook for now. And we're just going to tie in our thread here up at the front of the hook. And we're going to tie in the antenna, which we're just going to use some brown Goose Biots, and we're going to tie these in fairly short. We only want them to be, maybe 1/8, quarter of an inch or so. We're going to tie these right onto the side of the hook, and we want to kind of use the eye of the hook to keep them cocked off to the side. So we just tie, I like to do it one at a time, one on each side. There we go. Once you've got those tied in, all we're going to do is quickly just whip finish with a few turns. Trim your thread out of there. Then you're going to slide the bead forward, trying to work it over this thread. I use 8/0 thread, a fairly thin thread, so that I can get the bead over those wraps. Built up a little bit too much here, so it's kind of, there we go. I can kind of twist the bead, force it forward. Now the next thing to do is to wrap a lead body. So we're just going to take some lead here. We're going to wrap a body. And I'm going to cover the majority of the hook with this lead. I'm going to leave a little bit of room at the back, but for the most part we're going to get the entire body covered here. And you can trim out the excess. Now what we're going to do is we're going to take a pair of hemostats, and we are going to squish this wire from top to bottom. What this is going to do is it's going to flatten out the body, give us a nice stonefly profile. Stoneflies are very flat insects, so all I do is just kind of keep mashing it. I do usually do it little by little, squeezing harder and harder as I keep working it. So there you go, you can see I have a nice flat body going there. Now all I'm going to do is just tie my thread in at the back here. I'm going to trim out just a little bit of this. When you squish it, sometimes it gets a little bit too long. So all I'm going to do is undo one of these wraps. There we go. Tie in my thread. I'm just going to wrap through this wire a couple times. This will help keep it from rolling too much from side to side. Just keep going back and forth a few times. This will just help kind of lock it down, build up a little bit of a body for us to start to work with. Then the next thing we're going to do after we get a little bit of a body built up here is we're going to tie in a very small dubbing ball. So basically give us a point to start tying in our tails and developing the fly. I'm just going to take my thread to the back, and I'm just going to take some Whitlock SLF brown stonefly dubbing. And if you're going to tie golden color of this fly, you can use the golden color or the black. You can use whatever color you like. Usually it's going to be either golden, brown, or black. And all I'm going to do is apply a thin layer here to my thread, and right at the back here I'm going to build up a nice tight dubbing ball. Make sure it's nice and tight. And once you've got that built, you can trim out any of the excess shaggy fibers. We don't want too many shaggy fibers at the back of this fly, so trim out a few of them. Now the next thing to do is to tie in the tails, which we're going to use the same brown Biots. I'm just going to tie these in one at a time, and they're going to be about a quarter to half of the length of the body of the fly. And that little piece of dubbing will act as a prop to keep these Biots splaying outward, which is what we want. And I tie them so that the natural curve of the Biot does go out instead of in. We just take our thread forward, lashing down those Biots. Make sure they're nice and tight and secure, they're not going to go anywhere. You can see I have a natural curve to those Biots. Now what we're going to do is we're going to tie in a turkey Biot, a brown turkey Biot. I like to use Goose Biots for the tail and the antenna. They're just a little bit shorter and wider, so they make, I think they make a little bit better tail. But I like the hairline turkey Biots mainly for one reason, because they're extremely long and they're good for wrapping bodies. Whereas the Goose Biots are nice and short, good for antenna. They're okay for smaller flies, but when you're tying a big long body on a Stonefly, you want a Biot that's going to be, of course, long enough to do the job and give you enough room to finish the fly. So I'm going to tie this turkey Biot in right on the side of the hook. You can use a pair of hackle pliers here to help aid you in wrapping this Biot, but this Biot's about 1.5 inches to 2 inches long, so it's going to give me plenty of room to work with. All I'm going to do is take this Biot and very delicately I'm going to wrap it around the hook, and you can see I get that nice ridge from the Biot standing up off the fly. That's what I want. Oop, slipped off here. I'll try again. Gotta be very delicate with these materials here. We're going to use every inch of this Biot. I cut it pretty close here, and I can capture it. I want to get just a little bit more than halfway up the hook. It's pretty rare you're going to be able to get that much farther up with the Biot. And then we're going to capture it. Now the next thing to do is to tie in the casing material. You can use a couple different materials for this. You can use turkey wing, or I usually just have some pheasant tail laying around, so I just cut off a big hunk of pheasant tail. And all we're going to use this for is just a casing, so we're just going to tie this in right on top of the shank of the hook, all the way right back to where our Biot is started there. And just leave it hanging off the back for now. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to tie in a natural henback feather, nice mottled feather. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to strip the fibers back very delicately, just like so. And I'm going to tie this feather in so that it curves up. That way, when I pull it forward, these fibers will lay back. So I'm just gonna tie it in, trim out the excess here. Once I've done that, I'm ready to dub a thorax with the same brown SLF Whitlock dubbing, Stonefly brown. And I just dub enough to coat the thread here. Careful not to overdo it. This dubbing has a nice blend of flash, natural materials, and synthetics. So it dubs pretty well. It's one of my favorite dubbings to use. It's fairly easy to work with. A lot easier than the fully synthetic dubbings. And all we're going to do is build up a thorax, and I like to build up a fairly bulky and round thorax. Because if you look at a natural stonefly, that's where most of the bulk and beef is on the bug, is up near the thorax where the legs are. So usually what I do is a couple rounds of dubbing. I'll dub forward and then I'll dub back, and then I'll dub forward once more, just slowly adding it to the thread here. I don't like to do it all in one shot. There we go. Then we're just going to take our thread right up to the bead. Now we're just going to pull this hen feather forward, then gently stroke the fibers back, pinch it into place. We're going to do a nice loose wrap and capture that hen feather. You can see there it's a little scraggly at first. Kind of pull these fibers just a little bit tighter here. There we go. Then we're going to pull that pheasant tail forward for the casing. That'll help split the legs and drop them into place. Pull it tight, then also capture it with your thread. Then you can trim out the excess here nice and close. I use a nice fine tipped micro scissor to get as close as I can to the materials. Then you can lay down a couple more wraps if you so desire to clean it up. Then whip finish. And the last thing to do here is to add the Poxyback. So what I do is I either take some tack-free clear goo or some UV fly finish, whatever UV product you prefer. And what we're going to do is we're going to put a little splotch here on the top of the fly. Got to be very careful not to put too much on there. I just put a little dab, a little hump. And it's best to do it in small amounts. Then I take my needle, and all I'm going to do is just work it into the casing here, into the edge of the casing, to the front of the casing, into the casing. I want it to really penetrate in there. That'll help keep it in place when we hit it with our light. Here we go. And now all you have to do is cure it. I use a laser, but you can use a power light, whatever you like to use. Each company has their own light, but the laser is pretty quick at it, cures it pretty hard. And once you I call it bench curing, once you've cured it inside, especially for this thicker application, I usually stick it in foam and bake it outside in the sun, and that will really cure it rock hard. That's all there is to the Poxyback Microstone. Great little pattern by Mercer. It's a fly that's caught a lot of fish for me here in Colorado. Very natural looking, and also fishes extremely well. Great little fly. You can buy all the materials for this little fly at intheriffle.com.